Hey guys, welcome to Finktem Languages. Today we're going to talk about why perfectionism is the enemy of progress. And because if you try too hard to speak perfect, then you just won't learn to speak at all. And normally I do live streams on Fridays with uh, kind of shorter, more concise videos most Mondays, but we're getting to the end of the semester here, and so I'm busy with finals and all the end of semester projects and stuff that come with it. So I was too busy this weekend to make a actual video, but we're getting a live stream instead, which is just as good, in my opinion. So welcome. I'm just waiting for a few people to join. Welcome to those of you who are here with us already. Welcome. Oops. All right. Part of the reason why this video idea came to me is I was at a Christmas party this past Friday, and I was talking to a girl that I met there, and she was telling me, "Hey, Rasmus, thanks for joining." She was telling me about how she's learning Spanish. And let me just tell you, if you're at a Christmas party with me and you bring up languages, that might be a mistake. Hopefully you don't want to spend the night talking to other people, because you're going to be talking with me about languages and linguistics for at least an hour. And so she brought up Spanish, how she's learning Spanish, and we were talking about that for a while. And she mentioned how she's always nervous when she's speaking Spanish because she's not sure how to use the pluperfect subjunctive, the past perfect and the subjunctive mood when she speaks Spanish. And, you know, it's a common thing to hear from people. You know, there's this one tense or there's one mood that I can't get right, or it's too confusing for me. It's not too confusing. You just got to use it, and you got to, you know, you got to get used to it, and you got to practice it a lot, and then it just becomes much more natural. But yeah, at first it's hard. It's hard to get your subjunctive mood and all your different tenses, your noun cases. And good on her for, you know, wanting to learn, wanting to improve, wanting to get better. But you can't let that be an excuse to not talk. You can't be afraid of not speaking perfectly, okay? And so, you know, over the course of the night, we talked about that, and she kept saying, yeah, you're right. And I would say, just don't worry about making mistakes. Don't worry about incorrect grammar. Don't try to say things well. Well, try to say them well, right? Don't go into your conversations hoping or planning on saying everything perfectly, okay? There's a quote from Steve Kaufman that, that I heard him say when I was at Langfest this summer. I don't remember. He was doing one of his seminars, one of his talks, and he said this, and I wrote it down because it was so good. And I even wrote down the date. He said it on 8/26/18. He said, "When I speak a language, it's not to demonstrate that I can speak without making errors." True enough. When you speak a language, what is your reason for speaking it? I seriously doubt you're speaking your language because you want people to think that you can speak perfectly, right? That doesn't seem to be a really compelling reason to do so. Rasmus says, but natives speak perfectly from the first second, don't they? Being sarcastic in case it wasn't obvious. Yeah, I mean, I'm taking a first language acquisition class this semester. How people learn their first language, how infants learn languages, how children develop languages. And kids say some bizarre stuff. They don't use perfect grammar, but we understand them anyways, right? You can understand someone when they're using Tarzan speak, caveman talk, me Tarzan, you Jane. Something Benny Lewis talks about all the time. Tarzan speak, right? Um, you don't need all those little words in your sentences. You don't need to speak perfectly. I remember an episode of The Office one time. I don't know if any of you guys watch The Office in here. There was an episode of The Office where Kevin, he did one of the little talking head segments, and Kevin said, "Me decide not speak good English anymore. Take too much time. Use all of the little words not important. Why use lot of words when few words do trick?" You understand exactly what he means. Like, it's bizarre and doesn't make sense. Because I feel like sometimes it's easier for native speakers just to speak naturally. But if you're in a situation where you don't know all the rules, you don't know all the little words, then not using those words is not going to stop people from understanding what you're trying to say. So when you go to say something in a language, going back to what Steve Kaufman said, he said, for those of you who are just joining, he said, when I speak a language, it's not to demonstrate that I can speak without making errors. Okay. Now, maybe your reason for learning to speak a language, you know, it may, who knows what it is. It could be anything. Could be 100 different reasons for why you're speaking a language. Okay. But it's probably not to demonstrate that you can speak without making errors. So when you say something in a language, you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of saying it? Okay, are you trying to make a personal connection with someone? Are you trying to become more involved in the culture of the country that you're visiting? Are you trying to, I don't know, are you trying to learn something? Are you trying to make new friends? If you're speaking a language because you're trying to get a good grade in your Spanish class, then yeah, I recommend making sure you know how to use the pluperfect subjunctive when you're speaking. But in most cases, it's just not necessary. At best, it's not necessary, and at worst, it can hamper your actual progress. Right? I've definitely had times where I've meant to go say something to a native speaker or to one of my teachers or even to someone that's not a native speaker. If I know they know French better than me or if I know they know Spanish better than me. And you've probably had this situation before where you're like planning out in your head how you're going to say what you want to say. You're choosing the exact words and you're like writing a little script for yourself in your brain. And you're like, all right, I'm going to go say this to this person. And sometimes if I'm not sure about the words that I'm planning on saying to them, or if I'm like, I don't know if I should use this word or this word, should I use my preposition at this spot? Should I put it here? You know, how do I say it? And if you're not sure, for me, I should say, in times where I have been not sure, there have legitimately been times where I've just opted to not say what I was going to say for fear of not speaking perfectly. I've done it, and it can hold you back. That's why perfectionism is the enemy of progress. Okay. To speak perfectly is not a good goal. You know, if you moved to a country where they speak your target language and you plan on living there for the rest of your life, and you marry someone that speaks that language and you're raising your children in that language, then yeah, you can say 20 years from now, I want to be able to speak this language perfectly with no mistakes. I mean, you're going to want to learn that language perfectly somewhere down the line. You better be prepared for it to take a while. But in that circumstance, then, by all means, devote a lot of time and energy to that language, and hopefully someday you'll learn to speak it perfectly. For the vast majority of us who don't plan on focusing all of our language learning energy on one language for the rest of our lives, you're not going to learn to speak that language perfect. Sorry. And then there's the question of, what does it really mean to speak a language perfectly? Do I speak English perfect? That's a debate. I mean, most linguists would tell you the language itself, the correct version of the language, is defined by the people that speak it. Right? So I don't speak English wrong, but I don't know all the words in English. Sometimes I misunderstand when I hear someone say something. Sometimes I have to ask for clarifications because I don't understand what people are saying in my native language, even if they're native speakers. Sometimes I get tongue-tied. That's not a good thing to happen to you when you're a YouTuber. I tell you what, man, there are times where I'll be recording videos over the weekend. See, this is why I have to do live streams, because when I'm live streaming, it just forces me to just spit out the words and and just go along with it, even if I make mistakes. But there are definitely times where I'll be recording videos over the weekend to release on Monday. And I'll have to record one sentence like 30 times before I get it to the point where I'm actually happy with the way I said it. I'll be like, hey guys, welcome to blah, 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 blah. Okay. And I stop and I'm like, okay, I can say this. I can get it. Hey guys, welcome to Phantom Link. And I just have to keep repeating it over and over and over because I can't get the words to come out right. And that's in my native language. Rasmus says, you have never learned Portuguese, have you? I started learning Portuguese for like a few weeks this summer. I never really planned on going far with it. I just wanted to kind of get my feet wet in Portuguese because I was spending like 2 days in Portugal. So I learned a little bit. Anyways, if there's at least a question about whether you'll ever speak your native language perfectly, then you should never expect to speak your target language perfectly. Yes, one day I will learn Portuguese from Kevin Abroad, European Portuguese. Rasmus says, I'm learning 2 similar languages which are very similar in the written form, but not pronunciation. So when I try to practice speaking them and record myself, I keep confusing their pronunciation. Yeah, that's tough. Learning French was weird after having learned Spanish, because in some ways it helped me learn French a lot faster because there's a lot of vocabulary that's so similar. And in other ways, a lot of times I would just end up saying something in French. I would end up using a Spanish word with a French accent, even when it was not an appropriate time or place to do that. And then it started causing me to do the same thing in Spanish. Like I would accidentally say something in Spanish, say something in French when I was speaking Spanish. So that was tough. Kevin can't stay very long. That's okay. I have Portuguese class tonight. Okay. Well, have fun at Portuguese class. Diren. I don't know how to say Diren. Diren M. Yes. Thanks for joining. He says, yes, my brain keeps switching back to Spanish whenever I study French. Yeah, it's a real challenge. And Rasmus says, and because I am a perfectionist, I start beating myself up harshly. This has stopped me from participating in the 30-day challenge. Yeah. That's a real issue. You know, if you can't, it's kind of like a self-perpetuating cycle. If you can't practice your language because you don't speak it perfectly, then you're not going to improve and you're never going to reach the level where you can speak the language that you want to speak perfectly, right? Whereas if you can motivate yourself to start speaking the language before you speak perfectly, then you're going to learn that language and you're going to reach a higher level sooner than you would if you were just waiting until you speak perfectly. Kind of a catch-22. You know, how does that go? Catch-22. Any pilot who is proven to be crazy can request to not be sent onto combat missions. Okay, and only if he's proven to be crazy. But if the pilot requests to be exempt from combat missions, then it proves that he's not crazy. Something along those lines, right? Am I remembering this correctly? I never actually read the book, but I've heard about it. I've read about it. Okay. What about perfection in learning? Feeling as if you're not using the correct material. Perfection in learning. Feeling as if you're not using the correct material. Friends are constantly searching for the best resource. How would someone get over that milestone? It's a good question. Yeah, it's not something that I had really thought about. You don't want to be worried about speaking perfectly all the time. Do you want to be worried about learning perfectly? About finding the perfect resource? Well, in that instance, that scenario, I would say the same thing that I say about wanting to speak perfectly. If you just sit around waiting until everything's perfect, you're never going to learn, right? If you say, I'm not going to start learning until I have the perfect resource, then that time's just never going to come, okay? One of the things I wanted to talk about in this live stream is my friend Marco. I went to El Salvador with Marco, lived there for a year, and we just arrived like almost the exact same time, like 1 or 2 days apart. And so we spent like most of the year together in Central America. And I was just dedicated to learning Spanish. Okay, that was just my goal. And I did not care what it took. I was just going to learn Spanish. I tried to avoid people that spoke English, to tell you the truth. I know when you're in Central America, everyone wants to practice their English with you. I tried to avoid those people. I tried to hang out with people that didn't speak any English. Marco, he was an American. He went out and he would hang out with the people that learned English in high school. because it was easier. And it is easier. When you find someone that speaks your native language, it's a heck of a lot easier than having to learn their language. And I kept mentioning to Marco, like, you got to start practicing Spanish. Like, if you don't care about learning Spanish, then fine. But if you're here in Central America, presumably you would want to learn something. And I kept telling him, you got to find people to practice Spanish with. Don't just hang out with people that speak English all the time. And he kept saying, yeah, later, but I will at some point, but right now I'm just not good enough yet. My Spanish isn't high enough yet. I need to learn more before I can start speaking it. And I would tell him, no, man, you don't get it. Don't wait until you can speak Spanish to start speaking it. Start speaking now. You're going to sound like crap, but sooner or later, if you do that, you'll get to the point where you can speak well. And man, he did not learn Spanish. I was there. I lived with him for 11 months. We lived in El Salvador together. And he was my roommate for a good portion of time. Towards the very end, like maybe 9 months in, he kind of realized that he had waited too long. And then so he started really pushing himself to learn Spanish towards the end. And he kind of did a little bit, but it was too late for him to really catch up. I was already fluent in Spanish at the time, and he could understand Spanish pretty well because he had been surrounded by it. And so he heard people speaking, and he usually was able to understand at least the gist of what people were saying, but he couldn't speak very well. He did start to get bold towards the end. He would start speaking broken Spanish, and he did towards the end. Yeah, he did. But it was bad, which is fine. It's fine to speak bad Spanish, but you want to start doing that up front so that you get better, so that by 9 months of living in the country, you want to be able to speak well, right? That's why we're learning. All right, Alexandra says, I think that searching for the resource is an important part of learning since I like to introduce novelty in my learning. Yeah, I'm always trying new things, okay? Maybe that's a good point to bring up. Thanks for saying that. I'm not saying to stop looking for the perfect language learning resource. I'm not saying to stop trying to improve your language learning routine. Keep doing that, but don't let that stop you from starting, okay? You start now. Start speaking today. If you haven't started speaking your target language yet, find someone to speak with. Record a video of yourself and do the 30-day record yourself challenge, okay? Post your videos. Man, I got this like one hair sticking out the side. Just got out of the shower before starting this video. Anyway, sorry, that was a distraction. Record a video of yourself and post it on Instagram or on YouTube, or find someone, go to the Mexican restaurant, okay? Download Hello Talk or make an account on innerpels.com. Find someone to talk to. Start today. Okay? Don't worry if you're perfect. Don't worry if you have the perfect language learning resource. If you find a better resource later on, then do that instead. Yep, innerpels.com. I think that's what it is, or .net. Let me see, interpels.com. Nope, sorry. I think it's interpels.net. .net. Yeah, interpels.net. It's a pen pal website. Find people to speak your target language with. Hello, Plumian Bethlehem. Thanks for joining. Yeah, so you can't wait till you're perfect. You'll never learn then. You'll never learn if you start waiting that long. Start today, start now, start before you're perfect. And that goes for speaking. It also goes for trying to understand every word, okay? When you read a book, okay, here I have The Hobbit in Esperanto. And I guarantee you, I can read this whole book. I haven't yet. But I guarantee you I can read the whole book. Well, first of all, I already know the story of The Hobbit very well because I've read it a bunch of times in English. But let's see, do I have a better example? Apparently, this is the only Esperanto book I have. But I'm telling you, I can read this whole book. Am I going to understand every word? Heck no. I'm going to understand, I don't know, 90% of the words. Maybe. Somewhere around there. By the end of the book, I'll understand more of the words than I did towards the beginning of the book. But that still leaves 10% of the words that I'm going to have no idea what it means. Am I going to go look up a word every time I run into a word I don't know? Heck no. Ain't nobody got time for that. I'm learning to be okay with not being perfect. You got to learn to be okay with understanding less than 100% of the words, okay? Because if you stop to pull out your dictionary every time you run into a word that you don't recognize, it's going to take you 10 times as long to read the book. Same goes for when you're listening to people speak. I remember when I first moved to El Salvador and I would be in a conversation with someone, and then I would hear them use, maybe I would hear them use the pluperfect subjunctive. And then I would think to myself, okay, that verb, while they're speaking, I'm going on my brain, and he said, okay. He said, comiera. Okay, so it was E-I-E-R-A. And then, so when it has that verb ending, then it means that it's in the subjunctive. And then I'm thinking all this stuff in my brain while he's talking. I'm missing everything that he's saying, right? You don't need to grasp every little morpheme, every little nugget of semantic information that they're trying to display to you. Okay, you want to grasp the main concepts, and you have to be okay with whenever you miss one of the words that they're saying. You got to learn to get past that and still be able to piece the pieces together. And then you look at the whole grand puzzle, and then it's pretty clear what they were trying to say, right? But when you're so focused on the one piece of the puzzle that you're missing, then you're also missing the whole puzzle, okay? You don't want to get stuck in that trap. You don't want to get stuck in the trap of focusing so intently on the one piece of the puzzle that you don't have, that you're wasting your time. Okay. I'm learning English from Sincere One. Well, thanks for joining. Hopefully I don't speak too fast for you. I know I have a tendency to do that sometimes. Plumian says, I always look up words when I read something. I can't figure out meanings of words using the context. Yeah. Don't worry about the meaning of the word unless you think it's really essential to the overall, the big picture of the story. Okay. if you're reading a story and it says, Little Red Riding Hood was going to grandmother's house with a basket full of bread and cheese and tarts, and you don't know the word tarts, but you know that it's in a basket with bread and cheese, then you know she's bringing a basket of food to grandmother's house, and that's the important thing. Right? And then you're going to look up the word tarts, and you're going to find that word, and then you'll know precisely what she's bringing to grandmother's house. But it just took you way too much time for a small detail that was not essential to the story. Sorry, I'm not mad at you if that's what it sounded like. I'm just saying you don't need to worry if there's a single word that you don't understand, unless sometimes you can just tell, I know this word is really key to the sentence, or really key to the paragraph, or to the overarching story as a whole. And then, once in a while, you'll look up a word because you just have to. Okay, Rasmus says, off topic, but have you tried Learn with Text? No, I haven't. I looked it up. I remember you sent me a link to it one time, and I looked it up, and I just didn't have time to try it. Pretty busy with school right now, especially right now because we're in the finals season. I would like to try it sometime, though. I will try it eventually. Keep reminding me about that. Okay, Sincere One says, and I want to learn a little French. Like me, that's what I'm learning. So, just trying to understand every single word, which just ain't gonna work. Just trying to speak grammatically correct all the time. You do want to speak grammatically correct. Try to. If you say something wrong and you know you said it wrong and you can think of the right way to say it, then I repeat that sentence, okay? If I say it incorrectly the first time and I realize it and I catch it, then I'll go ahead and repeat that sentence because I'm trying to, reinforce that type of grammar in my brain, right? So I want to learn to speak correctly. The point is, if you can't catch yourself saying it wrong or you're not sure what's the right way, say it anyways. Say it wrong. It's better to say it wrong than to not say it at all because you're worried about being perfect. Okay? Tarzan speak that pushes your limits is better than grammatically correct speech. Let me say that again. Tarzan speech that pushes your limits is better than grammatically correct speech that doesn't. Okay? Because we're all at some level in our language, okay? And whatever level you're at, you're going to have things that you can say comfortably that you just know are already correct. But you're not pushing your limits. You got to live right on that border between the order and the chaos, right? I've brought this up before talking about facing your fears. You can't live in the Shire your whole life. You got to move towards Mordor, okay? And then once you're right on that border, that's when you're learning. Because if you're just saying things that you know for sure are correct and you have well memorized, well, then you're not doing anything. You're just spitting out things that you already know. You want to move towards learning the things that you don't know. And in order to do that, you got to start saying things that are hard. You got to start saying things that you know you're going to say wrong, but you try it anyways. And you keep moving towards Mordor. All right. Plumonian says, with all due respect, I see you using the sound for some words when you're not supposed to. May I know what your native language is? Yeah, my native language is English. And I use exactly when I'm supposed to. Maybe you disagree, and that's fine. I really don't care when you're supposed to use a or a, the AE sound, a. I'm not sure what sound exactly you were talking about there. But yeah, English is my native language. And see, sometimes people will think you're making mistakes, even when you're speaking your target, even when you're speaking your native language. And I don't know, there's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't stop me from speaking English. Also, don't stop me from speaking French or Spanish or Esperanto. Gosh, you guys should see my Esperanto channel. It's a train wreck every time. That's kind of the point, though. The point of my channel is just for me to struggle through speaking in ways that I say stuff on there all the time that I know is not correct. What flavor gum do you have? Trident Wild Blueberry Twist. I'm kind of a Trident freak because I know, well, okay, they market it as being good for your teeth, and I think it is to some extent. I know it's not like probably as good for your teeth as they advertise it to be. But every time I was drinking tea earlier, so pretty much every time I eat something or drink something, I'll chew a piece of Trident afterwards. One, because I like it, and two, because I don't know, hopefully it'll clean out my teeth a little bit. That was a small digression. All right. Rasmus says, finals for me, some language I study aren't in websites like Link. That made me try to learn with text. Painful to look up every word, but if a software can do it with a click, then it's much easier. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, I got nothing to say about that. If you're reading a book, then you're not going to want to take the time to look up every word. But if you're reading on Link or on text or I don't know, some other app or website that will look up the word for you just by clicking on it, then yeah, that's fine. That's not an issue. Okay. How do you pronounce concept? You use the a sound when you say it. Concept? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Okay, hey man, where does Esperanto use as an official language? What country? There is no country where Esperanto is used as an official language. That's the beauty of it. That's what a lot of people like about it, to tell you the truth. Hi, Andy. Thanks for joining. Yeah, I probably am almost done. I got to go to class here and, well, before too long. Thanks for joining anyways. So I have my notes here of different things that I just wanted to touch on. Tarzan speak that pushes your limits is better than grammatically correct speak that doesn't. That's what I was talking about. Yeah. So one thing that my French professor always tells us this. Because I'm in a more advanced French class, I'm not in French 202. Okay. He says, in the early stages of learning French, in the early French classes, you know, when you just have a master's student teaching your class, you say what you know. Okay. They teach you to say je m'appelle, and then you say je m'appelle. And they teach you to say comment ça va, and then you say comment ça va. And you stay within what you know because you want to learn those things, right? You're just getting your feet wet and it's scary and you know, it's hard to keep all that stuff straight in your mind. And so you say what you know. Then when you're in French 461 or I don't know, whatever class I'm in now, my professor keeps reminding us, you're past the point where you just say what you know. You got to expand your horizons and start working towards the things that you don't know. I can't teach you stuff anymore. French 204 or something like that is when the instructors stop teaching you French. You've learned all the grammar. You've learned most of the essential vocabulary. You've learned all your verb tenses and your moods and everything. So they stopped teaching you French. Okay, so now I'm in French 461 or something, like 451 or something, which is cinema in the French world. We watch movies and discuss them. Okay, and I'm also taking reading French texts. Okay, so we read plays and poetry and novels from France. Okay, but they're not teaching you French anymore. Okay, that's French 101 to 204. Now the onus is on me. The responsibility is on me to keep learning French if I want to keep doing it. And so he keeps harping on us. When you do your homework, we have to do little essays every week on the movie that we watched or on the book that we read. And he says, when you're writing your responses for your homework, don't just stay within the French that you already know. You got to push yourself to say stuff that you might not already know how to say. Right? And when you're in that border area between what you do know and what you don't know, but you're trying to learn, mistakes are going to happen. It ain't going to be perfect. But it's better to stay in that border area where learning occurs rather than to stay in the safe shire where everything is already known. You don't have to learn anything new, and you don't have to be afraid about not being perfect. Okay? Because in the shire where everything's safe, in French 204, whenever you say something, you're probably going to say it perfect because you already know that stuff. And then Plumian says, sorry for being a pronunciation Nazi. Maybe I was wrong. I always look up the pronunciation of English words and try to learn them by heart because English is not a phonetic language. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. You didn't offend me if that's what you were worried about. I pronounce words the way that I pronounce them. And that's all it is. Maybe you know someone that pronounces them different. I don't know. Are you learning British English or American English or something? I don't know. But all I'm going to tell you is I pronounce words the way that I do. And that's it. That's just the end of it. I ain't changing. I've had people bring this up to me before. They say, you pronounce especially wrong. And I'm like, no, the heck I don't. I pronounce it exactly the way I pronounce it. It's especially with a K. And that's how I pronounce it. And I'm not really mad. I'm just joking. Do you think it's important to learn pronunciations? Okay. Well, keeping in line with the theme of our video today, what do you do if you speak a language and you don't pronounce everything perfectly? You just keep speaking it, and you keep speaking it wrong. Okay? And that's what you do. Okay? Now, I will say there is a difference between a native speaker pronouncing something wrong and a learner of that language saying something wrong. If you're telling a native speaker that they're pronouncing a word wrong, then you're wrong. Okay? Because that native speaker isn't wrong. If you have a black friend, usually black people, it's a aspect of what do they call it? African American English, where they say, "Can I ask you a question?" Okay, and people say all the time, "Oh, you're saying that word wrong. It's not X, it's ask." But that's the way he pronounces it, and he's a native speaker, so it's not wrong. You're wrong. You're both right. I don't know. You can say, can I ask you a question, or can I ask you a question? There's not a right way to say it. It's just two different ways that native speakers will pronounce the word. Okay, now that's if you're a native speaker. If you're a non-native speaker trying to learn the language, you're going to have to decide what accent. You're going to have to decide what accents do I want to learn. Okay, if you want to learn African American English, then you're going to try to pronounce the word ask like a wood chopping axe. Okay. Most people won't want to learn non-standard dialects. Okay, you'll probably want to learn the most neutral, most standard dialect, because then you'll be able to communicate more easily with most people, and you won't constantly be having people say, no, you pronounced that word wrong. Okay. I'm learning Canadian French. Why? Because I don't go to France that often. I go to Canada. I go to Quebec. I go to Montreal. And so I learn Canadian French, with the effect that every time I speak to someone online, they go, you have a Quebec accent. Did you know that? And I'm like, yeah, I did know that. I do it on purpose. So, you know, there's consequences to what accent you want to learn. Now there's nuances to that too, right? Because like maybe you choose, you can choose between a British accent or a Boston accent or a Texas accent or just your standard neutral Midwest accent or your RP accent or I don't know, your Southern England accent if you're learning English. Or if you're learning Spanish, maybe you have to choose between Castilian or Colombian or Mexican or Argentine Spanish. You'll probably want to choose an actual accent, right? Like if there's no accent or no dialect that says things in a certain way, then you're not going to want to say things that way. So if you're learning English, you'll most likely want to learn the word especially. Okay. You probably won't want to learn my deviant accent and say especially, because just most people don't speak that way. Maybe you do. Maybe you're coming to Wisconsin, or maybe you're moving to an area where people say especially, and then you'll want to learn to say it that way, maybe. But you probably won't want to say especially, because no one says it that way. So you can be wrong when you're learning pronunciation. Okay. You can be wrong if you're speaking in a way that just native speakers would never imagine speaking. And then the even deeper level of nuance to there is if you just can't learn the pronunciation correctly like a native speaker would, at some level, you just have to learn to be okay with that, because you're always going to have an accent. Try to improve your accent, try to get better, but learn to be okay with having your accent and say, I'm not perfect. I'm not a native speaker. I'm imperfect, and it's not worth my finite time and resources to put towards trying to become perfect when I could be putting that energy towards other useful endeavors. Ellie Bobs says, or Andy says, sometimes native speakers say escape instead of escape. Oh yeah, I say that, escape, escape, escape. I probably say that. I'm not sure what I say now that I think about it. I probably say escape all the time. Totally. And espresso. Can I get a cup of espresso? Yep, that's my dialect. Ellie Bobs says, don't learn similar language together, such as Spanish and Italian. Try and learn languages like French and German together, or Spanish and Swedish. Yeah, you'll get mixed up a lot less. English is not my native language. This is Plumian. English is not my native language. Here I find a large number of people mispronouncing words, and I am an odd man out when I try to pronounce words correctly. Yeah, you want to, here's the thing though, you want to give up on your idea about people mispronouncing words and other people pronouncing them correctly. Now, as a non-native speaker of English, you probably will mispronounce words, okay? I don't mispronounce words in English. I mispronounce words in French. I mispronounce words in Spanish. I don't mispronounce words in English, even when I say express or accept, or I don't know, what were the other words? Espresso, especially. Okay, that's the way I say it. It's not wrong. I'm just different. And Sincere One says, I've never heard that pronunciation here in North Carolina. They say specially, not especially. Yeah, I mean, if you're speaking quickly, then yeah, you can say especially that one. Yeah, I can see that. And Andy says, wait, Rasmus says, do you think it's possible to pronounce well enough if you can't hear the differences between certain sounds? The question there is not whether you can learn it. The question there is, what do you mean by well enough? Goes back to exactly what we're talking about in this live stream. For you, is well enough speaking perfectly? Hopefully not. Hopefully we've covered that that base by now. You want to learn to speak as well as you can, as well as you want to dedicate as much time, energy, and resources and focus towards learning to speak well as is feasible, as you deem worth it, okay? Don't continue learning to speak better and better and better and better after the point where you've deemed that you've already reached a sufficient level and that the time and energy into learning more won't be worth it. Put that time and energy towards learning a different language or learning a different skill in the language that you're already learning. You know, we have finite time on this earth. People here don't care about pronunciation. I don't care about pronunciation that much. I want to try, when I'm learning a language, I try to speak it well if I can, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is learning to be able to communicate with other human beings. For me, maybe for you, you have different priorities. Living in a land like India where a humongous population of people speak English mostly incorrectly, I find it disheartening for someone who always tries to get better at the English language. Goes back to what you consider to be incorrect. There's many, many, many ways of speaking English, and there's not one correct way, okay? Same thing for every language. Now, if you're brand new to a language and you're trying to learn that language, you're going to say things wrong. Yes, you're going to speak incorrectly at times. Okay? But that doesn't mean that there's one right way. We'll put it like this. Maybe there's a bunch of wrong ways to speak a language, but there's not one right way. There's probably almost as many right ways to speak the language as there are wrong ways. As long as you're understood, that's the important thing. Okay, talking about procrastination, are you procrastinating on making videos? Oh gosh, okay. Accidental Polyglot, hello, welcome, thanks for joining. He says, when it comes to accents, I'm torn between European and Brazilian Portuguese. I have to travel to Portuguese as often as I can. I love the country, but I'm drawn to Brazilian Portuguese, but speak a mix of both. Yeah. Now, as a non-native speaker, you can legitimately choose between one or the other. Okay, or you can learn some more fringe dialects, like whatever they speak in, I don't know, Mozambique or I don't know where they speak Portuguese. Cape Verde. I just said Cape Verde with a Spanish accent because verde is a Spanish word. Cape Verde is a Portuguese speaking place, right? Am I right? Angola. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to learn? Where do you want to learn Portuguese from? Doesn't matter. Learn Portuguese from someplace. Don't make up Portuguese words that don't exist. Don't make up pronunciations that aren't from anywhere. I mean, I guess you can if you want to be avant-garde. Legitimately, I don't care if that's your goal, then do whatever you want. Don't freak out about speaking correctly all the time. Don't worry about being perfect. Choose one or choose a mixture of them, don't matter. Okay. Okay. I live in the Midlands in England, and there are certain accents like Scottish, Glaswegian. Did I say that right? Scottish Glaswegian. That me and my friends cannot understand as it is so guttural. Yeah, I've met people from, who was it? I was in Cancun a few years ago, and I met people from maybe Manchester. And I had to keep asking these people to repeat themselves. I was hanging out, we were watching a football game together, and I had to keep asking them to repeat themselves because I could not understand what they were saying. And they were speaking my native language. And they were native speakers. It's probably even worse in parts of Scotland. I have this book here called Button Ben a Go Go. All right, and it's from Scotland. And let me read you a passage from this book. Paulo Stevenson Brune's Connectic Code was a direct hone me doon fae his maternal grandfather, Stephen Clogg. The Clogg family pool was a brie o' grippy East Coast insurance men and born-again Presbyterian fishwives. What the crap did I just read? There's a lot of varieties of a single language. The only reason I have this book is just to kind of, I don't know, I thought it was interesting because dialect is so bizarre. Here we go. The Jesus Book. It's the Bible translated into Hawaiian Pidgin. Okay, let me read you a verse from the Bible real quick. What verse should I read? I'm going to read John 3:16. Just cracks me up. Okay. God, when get so plenty love and aloha for the people inside the world that he wouldn't send me, his one and only boy, so that everybody that trusts me no get cut off from God, but they get the real kind of life that stay to the max forever. And that's the Bible, translated into Hawaiian Pidgin. You know, there's not a right way to speak. There's not a wrong way to speak. I keep saying there's not a wrong way to speak. For language learners, you can just speak wrong. You can say something wrong. You can. Okay, but there's so many, there's such a wide varieties of ways to say things correctly. Don't limit yourself and get so focused on saying things and believing that there's one certain right way that you have to speak. Okay. Okay. Andy says, I wonder how many people are still doing it. I still see Finctum Language's daily videos, but how many other people are still going? There's a lot of people doing the 30-day record yourself challenge on Instagram right now. A lot, like a huge number. Kind of blew me away, to tell you the truth. People are still starting. They're starting right now. Like, I'm ending my challenge is done in 2 days, and there's still people that are starting. It's great. And like Rasmus said, it's hard because you're worried about being perfect all the time. It's been so motivating for me to watch people struggle through their videos and say things wrong with terrible accents, and just butcher everything, but do it anyways. And I'm telling you guys, that's how you learn. If you're not worried about being a perfectionist, you're going to learn. You're going to improve. You're going to get better. And I've had so many people send me thank you messages and stuff, especially on Instagram. A few people have been doing it on YouTube. A few people have been doing it on Twitter. But especially on Instagram, I've had a ton of people sending me messages and stuff saying, like, thanks for doing this. I never would have recorded a video of myself speaking my target language before, but then I saw other people doing it and I got motivated. And now I realized how easy it is. And it is easy. You just speak. It doesn't have to be a minute long. It can be 20 seconds long if you want. But you have to not be worried about perfectionism. Okay. Rasmus says, don't many people still doing it, at least not on YouTube? Yeah, I think Please Clap is still doing it, but on Instagram there's a bunch. Okay, the worst English accent has to be the Scouse accent, spoken in Liverpool in the UK. Not familiar with that. Maybe the worst is not the right word, the hardest to be understood. Yeah, for sure, there's a dialect continuum, right? So I'm here on this side of the continuum, and then someone that speaks Scots English is here, and we can't understand each other pretty well. But there's other people that live in, I don't know, maybe northern England, and they can understand the Scots speakers better, presumably. And I can understand them better than I can understand the Scots speakers. And they can understand me better than they can understand someone from Texas, presumably. All right. Currently learning Swedish, and apparently a lot of that will be understood in Norway, Finland, and Denmark. Not Finland, because Finland is completely unrelated. But yeah, to my knowledge, that's another good example. To my knowledge, Norwegian speakers can understand and speak to Swedish speakers. And I don't have firsthand knowledge of this. I've just read about this or heard it from other people. If you speak Norwegian, you can speak to Swedish people. And you can also speak to Danish people, because those three languages are similar enough. But it's hard, or impossible, I don't know. It's hard for a Danish speaker and a Swedish speaker to converse. But there's that one thing in the middle that can converse with both of them, I think. Okay, just curious, how many languages can you speak? Tried learning an Indian language anytime? I've never tried to learn I've never tried a language from India, like Hindi or something. I've tried in the past. I've spent time learning French, Spanish, Esperanto, a little bit of Tokipona, a little bit of Romanian, Portuguese, Greek, a few other things, kind of dabbling. Okay, Finland has 2 official languages, Finnish and Swedish, but Swedish speakers are a minority, maybe 2 to 5%. Okay, I didn't know that. What part of the USA are you located in? I'm in Wisconsin. In the northern part of the United States, in the Midwest. Okay, I've heard that Danish is starting to separate from Swedish and Norwegian, but Norwegian and Swedish are still similar to each other. Finnish is a completely different language family. Yeah, Finnish is more closely related to Hungarian and Estonian, I think. Anyways, I got to end it here because I got to get to class. But thank you all for watching. Hopefully, by the time I'm done with finals here pretty soon, I'll start to get back into posting regular videos again. But live streams are cool too, because then I get to interact with all you beautiful people. So thanks, and we'll see you guys later. Still doing a live stream this Friday, probably.